we kick things off. Wait for that little red light to turn on. Okay, welcome everyone to the April 2022 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. My name's Mike O'Shea. I'm on Twitter at InTunedIn, and we've actually got, I think it's like second month in a row, we've got all three of us here.
Yep.
So Stephen's here, Ben's here. Yeah, I think it doesn't, well, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, what date are you in the US, Steve?
Next month we may not be available.
I will be in the US this time next month, so I will not be available.
Okay. And what about you, Ben?
I will be in the US this time next month, so I will not be available. No, I mean, we could potentially get weird and do it at an insane time, but yeah,
no,
we're going to be over at MMS. So
you'll be in Minnesota.
No, it'll be the week after MMS.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Is it?
No.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm going to be in Colorado then. Okay. There's a chance I might be able to jump on.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no stress. Just means I need to sort of plan in advance for something that I can carry without having to throw things at you when I want to mute myself and not talk for a few minutes.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess as we go through today's stuff, I'll have to sort of hit mute on a regular basis because I successfully avoided COVID while I was overseas. I was incredibly paranoid for 2 weeks, thinking, please don't get COVID, because I wanted to be able to fly home. And my dreams came true. I didn't catch COVID before I left. I caught COVID on the way home. So basically within a day or two of landing, it was obvious what was happening, tested positive, and had a great time on the couch for a week or two. So a lot of to use Kenneth's term, a lot of what he would classify as candy was consumed during that period. So with that, just to kick things off, just the usual, if there's anyone new who hasn't been along before or anyone hasn't been around for a while, and you just want to drop a quick intro into chat, or if you want to unmute just to sort of introduce yourself as well, that's fine. But otherwise, fairly straightforward set of things that we'll cover today. Just some of the things that were part of the future of hybrid work announcements that came out. Now, obviously, we're going to sort of filter it based on topics that are mostly relevant to the things that that we normally cover off, as opposed to bringing in because like I haven't even looked at what the everything that was listed in the enhancements to like M365 productivity, and I know that there are a lot of other announcements that sort of part of the M365 world, but not really falling into the things that we would normally discuss. But it doesn't mean that maybe we can discuss it if it's something that somebody is interested in. I'm sure between all of us on the call that there's at least somebody who's been through everything without as opposed to me, I'd be going through, I'd start reading a paragraph and say no, or watching the launch or the announcement videos and going, I might just scrub my way through the next 3 or 4 minutes because I'm not particularly interested in this section. Now, some feedback that I'd like to give is the year is 2022, I believe. I think it should be a legal requirement that all online video players or sites should have thumbnail views as you scrub back and forth through video to see where are you away from that section you are trying to avoid. So I think that might be my goal. That's my mission this year, is to I won't pick on a particular cloud service streaming platform.
Sounds like it'd be a really good startup platform there, Mark. You could do a startup campaign on it and just drive that forward.
Yeah. It's also actually no, I'm not. I'll leave it alone for now. But it made it kind of scrubbing through the media service that shall not be named, is not something I enjoy. And
are you talking about the fact that you've been home alone for the last month or two and that service, or we're not talking about that service?
We're recording.
No. This is no. So basically, like any real streaming media platform gives you thumbnail views for scrubbing.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, yet alone something that calls itself something media services and doesn't offer that feature in their player. It's also one that's got fantastic lack of buffering capabilities built into it as well. Except I know that that's because people aren't using CDNs the way they should with it. So I'll let it be the thing that, yeah, I'll give it a free pass on that bit. But anyway, if you haven't already been through they've kind of got the keynote video and then there's the 3 breakout sessions. I think they're all like 30 minutes each, so it's not a huge amount to consume. I'll also mention there's like a couple of Microsoft Mechanics videos to take a look at as well. So I guess, for introductions, I didn't see anyone putting their hand up for this one. So I think we can just sort of jump straight into the Windows powers the future of hybrid work announcements. So I want to start off with one that I really liked, and I'll go through the reasons why I like it, and it may not be for everyone. Going through some of the announcement details of it, like probably the big thing that I sort of noticed with like all of the feedback and the comments, because it's a free service, it's free. Sorry, not allowed to say it's free. It's included with your Win 10 Enterprise E3 license. So of course there weren't people complaining about pricing, which is a good change. But what I like though is that it just sort of a pretty simple layout as to how do you go through and start working with rings. So with your different deployment rings. So this is something that I think is still, for people who aren't part of the Windows desktop world or the M365 app deployment world, the concept of rings, etc. When you're talking about deployment rings and you start talking about what percentage of people in the organization should be using this or that, it's something that kind of just gets too complicated for people too quickly. So having an option where it's just let Microsoft make these decisions for you. And let them sort of pick and choose what machines are going into the different rings. Now, I know that there are going to be, because we're talking about a machine learning component to this, where it's making decisions around, what machines and users are going to be good candidates, etc. I know that there'll be people who push back on, but sometimes machine learning goes wrong and the wrong things occur, and it's like, everything goes wrong sometimes. It doesn't mean that you avoid everything. So the thing I like to use as an example there is, and this is a much better one in person. It works better when someone's like, blah blah blah, I blah 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 once and never again. It's like, I got food poisoning once, and then I rub my belly and say, but I decided to start eating again. And sometimes people just give me a weird look and as if, what's that got to do with anything? And it's like, just go back to that thing that you're so against.
Yeah, it's not a direct attack on you. It's just something that happened.
Yes. So with this, there's a few of the things that I like about it. So first of all, that percentage of devices. So first of sorry, there's that wonderful cough coming in. So a couple of the things that I really like. So first of all, that minimum number of devices, like they're not even giving it a percentage for that test ring. So I really, like that it's something when, when you've got orgs saying how many machines should we be, more aggressive with like this, and it's all, you'll always sort of see a number about, keep it as a really small number. I think this is fantastic because it's like, we're at 100% when we exclude that test ring. Now, what we can also think about with that, though, is that that's also, once we start looking at this, it gives us an indication that the audience for this is, not a small customer. So, so it's not targeting, your typical sub. Should I use, or is Microsoft still 250 and below is small and mid-sized business, or 250 is small business? So we've got the automatic filtering of Win10 E3 licenses being required. So that's why I'm sort of thinking 250, because below that 250 space, you'd be pushing, generally speaking, Microsoft wants them, using Microsoft 365 Business, which has got Win10 or Win11 Business, not Enterprise. So it's not targeting that group who probably don't want to get too involved in this kind of thing anyway. It's also not targeting organizations that have already got this stuff figured out. So larger orgs that have, basically put their own rings together, it's not targeting them. It's everyone in the beginning, and it's almost like I view it almost like prescriptive guidance, but you don't actually have to do much to make it work. So instead of it being a series of docs articles you're working your way through, instead it's like, no, first ring, will include 1% of the devices, quality updates go out on day 0. So things like the quality update timeframes, I think showing how quickly quality updates is going out, to me, that's probably one of the things that I think is going to potentially, maybe scare some people a little bit if they've, but really if it's I probably view that as more people coming from, maybe coming from the WSUS side where everything is being, manually, an environment where everything is being manually approved. I can imagine, if that's an environment that you're used to, seeing things like 0 days is making you panic. And 7 days would be like, oh no, we wait at least 14 to 30 days every time. We don't care if there are 0 days up there. We'd rather be 100% compromised than have to roll back a few machines.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, fantastic logic. So I think that aggressiveness of the quality updates, probably for me, I guess that's probably the thing that I like to see, that message, even if it means that people look at the guidance and sort of figure out, exactly what's being configured here, so that they can just go through and create their own policies where they are, where they're saying, okay, look, this, the test string is 3 days, first ring is 7 days, fast ring is 30 days or 14 days, broad ring is 30 days. So even from there, I think just having this something, a line drawn in the sand saying that this is what Microsoft will give you if you just sort of click the things, let it do its thing. So for me, I just like the simplicity of it. Now, the other thing as well that I noticed through quite a bit of the material around this is people don't seem to have gotten the memo that we're not talking about managing Office apps in here. We are managing Microsoft 365 apps on the desktop here. So yeah, I know, just out of curiosity, how many of you still catch yourself saying like O365 Pro Plus?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. So that's something where I'll go to say it. It's like, oh, yeah. And of course it's more confusing because Office is still a thing, but it's your perpetual versions. Now, the other thing I like about it is that they are sort of throwing in, not just sort of making it about your Windows rings, but adding in, your M365 apps and your Edge rings. Now, I don't think there's really any details yet specifically about, what specific, especially on the M365 app side. What I'm curious about there is that going to be like monthly channel? Or is it going to be semi-annual channel in that case? So one or the other, I'd be surprised. It's not going to be current channel or current channel preview, that's for sure. Because because you've probably all seen the notification inside of Intune where or in Endpoint Manager where it says basically, we recommend using monthly channel. And that is something that, for me, I like the idea of people using monthly channel just because, you know, your Office, sorry, I said Office updates, your Microsoft 365 monthly updates that way. It, you know, small continuous changes, you know, or Office just doesn't really disrupt you when it needs to update unless you've got policy, unless you're never closing anything and never shutting your machine down.
Yeah.
But then also throwing Edge in there as well. So the fact that they're sort of not just saying let's simplify the OS experience, they're also throwing in the desktop apps. Actually, I'll just say desktop apps in this context. That's easier, and Edge. So I just like the simplicity with this one. So it'll be good to see it because I don't think I've sort of poked around my tenants. I couldn't see it lighting up in any of them yet. But this is something that, like, it's not going to make sense in my demo environments, but this is something that I think is going to be a good fit for people who just haven't really done anything here and have ended up with every version of Windows 10 and 11 that exists running in their organization, including old, unsupported versions as well. So has anyone else had a look into this as well? Now, I guess the other thing I've got to say with some of the things here is, I'm sure, so Steve, and I'm sure this applies to Quok as well, are going to have to sit out quite a few of the things that we talk about in here due to them being in a situation where the lines between what they know and what they do or don't know, whether it's public or NDA or not. I think I've hopefully, well, actually, I think Steve, I shouldn't throw Steve under the bus and say, Steve said that everything in my slides is okay. But Steve definitely did not say that. But Steve also did not say, oh, no, actually, no, there was one thing I had in there, but that was just me being an idiot that I pulled out.
So
after the
what
recording,
you have on the list there right now, Mark, is what is available today in the docs.
Yeah.
But there will be more information forthcoming around this, including when it gets closer to GA and public preview.
Yeah. So I think so let me just grab I'll drop the URL in for this just so from here, because there's a couple of things that are useful from within that page. Is that just so for me, whenever these announcements, I always like to go and look at the comments and see what I can learn from them. And in this case, most of the comments were people not sure why they'd use this versus something else, or what is this designed for. And then there's also a link to a frequently asked. They've already put together their own frequently asked questions on this as well. That links from that page that does a good job of explaining some of that stuff. So the FAQ pages and the user comments, the feedback section are worth it there. Now, Eddie, we're talking about approving individual updates later for you. So, I know you miss them, but I know that there might be some situations in the future where there might be certain types of individual updates that you want to approve. So we've got something coming up for you. So I'll pretend that I included it for you. Not that it's a slide that's already in. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I guess Ben, anything from you, Steve? Steve and Quacko won't ask either of you to jump in on this one, just in case. Yeah. Basically, don't want to get either of you in trouble here. But Ben, anything from your side?
I'm going to be I'm going to be completely honest. My days of being super concerned about this sort of stuff are well and truly behind me, I hope. Yeah. But I mean, look, it just gets to the point here where when I was working with it, you'd set it up once and you just literally never think about it again. It was so it just does not affect us anymore, as far as really spending most of your time worrying about dialing in all the different rings and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It does get to that thing, like it's kind of the same, if we're talking about our Office Pro Plus stuff again, where that used to be such a huge ordeal to really even just upgrade Office when you needed to. Now it's not. It's getting to these sort of systematic things that we all used to dread are now becoming just part and parcel of, you just turn it on and never think about it again. That's all I got. I just think it's fantastic that I don't have to be stressed about it anymore.
And I guess the other thing as well, that for me, when I was sort of looking through the comments and the frequently asked questions stuff on this, the other thing that, like, I've always got to remind myself of this, and I'm sure some of you do occasionally until you're in another environment where we think the world is at a certain place in terms of leveraging this stuff. But I think it's fair to say, those of you that I know personally, I would say, and even a few of you that I've interacted with, I think it's fair to say we live in a bubble where we think that, like, so for me, like when I sort of find out that somebody isn't using Office 365, and I don't mean that they're not, and I specifically mean O365 here. Not that they're using anything from Google or some other cloud. Is there any other cloud productivity suite? I've got no idea. Where if somebody's not using using Office 365, it's like really like what what year is it? Where have you been? Were you asleep under a tree?
Yeah.
Like there's a children's story about that. So but even like other things as well, that sort of feed into that is that we assume that people are at a certain level, but most of the world out there, I would say, can't have an Office 365 conversation, yet alone a Microsoft 365 conversation.
Yeah.
And it's something like this that reduces the barriers to somebody getting more, basically getting the desktop N365 components down. And so basically, let's just sort of call this, Microsoft's desktop apps. Like, even though there's, people say, oh, what about this? What about that? Let's ignore the rest of them for now. Like, I just view this as a way to get people, first of all, to get them using this stuff, and for them to not have to think about deployment rings. Just stop.
Yeah.
It was
you
something
don't need to. Yeah, you just don't need to worry about being finicky about this stuff anymore.
It was our pain having to deal with this stuff. Back in back in 2015 when it was all getting introduced.
But also, and on that topic, the idea of having to spend or have an entire teams spend a week dialing in their patching rings was because previously, when you would patch software, there was a high chance that it might fail. So you'd need to really, really rigorously test this in specific, internal rings and stuff to make sure that you weren't going to cause major outages. That's just, for the most part, gone away now, where patching Office is just, it's not a thing anyone thinks about anymore. So why do you need to think about dialing in your rings to make sure that, this happens at exactly this time? It's just, the problem's gone, as far as I'm concerned anyway. But again, as Mark said, we do live in a bubble where we're all on the bleeding edge. I'm literally spoke with someone about how they're going to move away from their fat client installation of Office the other day. So, it still exists. It's a thing.
Okay, so just one more thing I realized that I didn't mention on here is that also in here that the Windows 365 Enterprise, not Windows 365 business plans. That basically, once again, it's just a Windows Enterprise conversation there. So no real surprise there that if the version of Windows that you're getting technically isn't Enterprise, you're not going to get this functionality. But otherwise, this is one that no real complaints at all. From this was something that just overall, I view viewers as quite positive. Now, I can imagine that, at some point in time, the requests are going to be, can it be opened up? Can we change some of the defaults around, how many days to delay and change the percentages, etc. And I hope that the answer to that ends up being no, it's now time for you to take the training wheels off and implement it the way that you want, using the other tools that already, or the other elements of the UI that already exist.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything else that anyone wants to cover on this one? Like overall, I guess there's not a huge amount with this one, but it's just the simplicity is just the appealing part of it. Now, the next one, what have we got next? We have got Smart App Control. So let's cover off what it is. So it blocks malicious or untrusted apps based on confidence level. So effectively, it looks like, from what's available so far, and I think you'll find, hopefully we see more stuff from Dave Weston digging into it sooner rather than later. But with this, it's really, from the best that I can sort of figure out with it based on everything that they're talking about, it looks like it's using the same block or allow list type information that you'd be getting through Smart Screen on Windows. But it seems like the things that I'm finding a bit confusing with it at the moment is it seems very consumery. And I know consumery is not a word, but I'll use it as a word here because there's, it's like, I thought there were other solutions that were being built, that were already available that did this stuff. But I think a lot of those are kind of like your Windows enterprise capabilities. So with this one, you'd need to reset your PC in order to do it. So basically, fresh install of Windows only. Now, here's the other thing that sort of makes me think it seems more consumer oriented than enterprise. Is this bit here? It starts in evaluation mode, and it may not actually enable it based on your usage patterns. It may deem that you aren't worthy. Your usage patterns may be something that are just going to be completely incompatible with this. So basically, for me, that's not really something that, unless there's an enterprise override switch where it says, oh, yes, you are going to be turned on. It just, I haven't seen enough information yet to really figure out, is this something that's going to be useful in business? But once again, maybe it's just something that so basically to turn it on, off, put it into eval, but it just seems, so that bit there that it starts in eval mode, and let me sort of let me jump out to the page where they're covering some of this stuff. And maybe it's just the wording in these articles that's kind of, not completely scrubbed yet. And I'll just drop this into chat as well for you. But here we go. Oh, okay, maybe I'm misreading this. Okay, now that I'm looking at it again, it's saying if you're a good candidate for Smart App Control, it will automatically be turned on. If not, it will be turned off. But then it says once the evaluation is complete, or if you manually turn it on or off. So, okay, so maybe you can override. But what's the overall message here? Let's see, here we go. Okay, so sorry, okay, no, I was wrong on that. Okay, so, if it's available for your device, let evaluation mode do its job and determine if you're a good candidate. So, okay, you can override it. So that's a better story than what I was picking up from some of the other content. Now, the other thing down here is that they're basically just pushing devs to sign their apps. Mm-hmm. Now, that is not a new story. I guess, going back shortly after Vista launched, there was a program called Velocity where basically it changed what OEMs could preload onto their PCs. And it basically was shifting from OEMs and, okay, we might still see somewhat questionable inclusions from OEMs at times today, but but going back to that point, effectively, like they weren't, they were just sort of dropping in whatever, nothing was, they weren't signing their own apps or things along those lines. So that program did a good job of getting the OEMs to do some cleanup there, but there's still a bunch of apps out there that, basically that aren't signed. And I think these days, especially when you start thinking about supply chain attacks, etc., this is something where, anything we can do to sort of hope that what's going on is trusted is going to be a good thing here. But I'm glad. Okay, so at least now, like, let's just see. So what are the actual requirements? Because the other thing as well with something like this, if it's saying that it's in enterprise only, then obviously it's an enterprise feature. But if it's in pro, and I don't think they're specifically calling any version out. So I'll assume this is consumer oriented for now. Maybe some use in an SMB, but more questions and answers on some of this stuff at this point. Now, just to let you know that this is, so that screenshot that I had is from this machine. So, was it smart? So it is in here. I don't really want to have to do a reset to turn this feature on to test it out. I think I might just try it in some VMs first. So it's in current insider build. So whatever this build is, actually I should, hopefully this should be whatever the latest build is, unless there's another one. Oh, good, there's not another one sitting there for me. So what build is this? So this is 22.593 from almost a week ago now. So any of you who are on Insider Fast or Insider Dev, I think it is these days, should have access to that. It may have even been in there a little bit earlier. I just wouldn't have been searching for it. Yeah. So Eddie, so I'm pretty much agree with that. So even though you can still, because even the existing technologies allow you to layer cloud trust, which would still be using that same engine over the top of what you're doing, what you're manually setting inside the org. So I think so my thinking's the same. Like smaller orgs where you just want more set it and forget it options, this might be it. But let's wait and see what comes out. Now, what have we got next? So anyone else got any insight onto this? Did anyone even know it existed?
I've not played with it before.
Yeah. Sorry, I just need to mute. Okay. Now, this might be, seeing that I think I'll plan on flying. Okay, so this might actually work out well, because I was saying to Ben and Steve, or at least to Steve, maybe, I'm not sure, saying that I'll save this for this was pre-kickoff, saying that I'll save this stuff for a future session. So maybe that future session will be next month while both of you are away. So I can,
Sure.
So I'll be able to dig into these in more detail. But once again, here seeing that, basically enhanced phishing protection with Smart Screen. So once again, leveraging more of what Smart Screen is actually capable of, and starting to, do more at the OS level, rather than it necessarily just being something that's going on behind the scenes in your office apps, your Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise, or your Microsoft 365 apps for business.
With Bing.
Or perhaps the appropriate versions of the perpetual versions of Office Pro Plus. Have I included everything there? I think that's probably good base coverage. Okay, so I won't go through these in too much detail here, but really probably just the two, or actually probably, like, if we sort of take a look at these, like all of these are identity related. So, phishing protection, obviously identity related, CredGuard, identity, LSA, identity, but LSA more your good old on-prem. So what's that? So so that's basically like, NTLM, basically still still being a problem. And then additional degrees of data encryption on your, so assuming your devices are already encrypted. So the thing that sort of threw me with this when I was first sort of looking at it, and why I didn't want to cover it too much here, was you see the term personal data encryption, and you're not really thinking, is this an enterprise feature? But it's another, but basically from the limited information that there seems to be on it so far, I don't want to say that it's I don't want to use the letters EFS. But all I can think of is it EFS, but with an ability for people to actually recover without having to know exactly what they're doing. That's my horrid memories of EFS is people not realizing what they need to do to recover until it was too late. But the things though that you'll sort of see specifically with it is they do then call out not just working with Windows Hello, but they also are talking about using it with Windows Hello for Business. So there's definitely like a business/enterprise component to it. But yeah, there's so far not a lot of detail on this one, and I think that's pretty much the case for most of these. It's kind of like a paragraph on each of them, not a huge amount. So so I'll see I'll sort of find out what can be covered without doing any kind of NDA breaking, and I'll try to figure out, even for some of this stuff, like I'd love to get someone. Actually, I've got someone in mind that I might try to reach out to see if we can get them to sort of jump into some of this stuff. But yeah, the time of day could be problematic. So with that, before we jump to the next slide, so these were really just the key Windows 11 things that I pulled out that were sort of focused on the management side. Just a couple of the other random things that I've seen people get really excited about is that you've got your things like updates to File Explorer, so tabs will be coming back to File Explorer, and a lot of people are getting really excited about that. And it's like, no, I want a multi-window File Explorer. I don't care about tabs. What else was there? So a bunch of accessibility enhancements, including basically system level. So basically at the Windows level of it doing text to speech. So basically it doing captioning from the best I could gather, captioning regardless of what app the data or the audio source was coming from. So instead of it being like YouTube captions or Teams captions or whatever, that it would actually be Windows doing the real-time captions for you. So I'm kind of curious to have a look at some of that stuff, because there are definitely a few good scenarios where that could come in handy. So now we move on to the Windows 365 piece. So so quite a few big announcements here, or not a huge number of announcements, but some of the announcements that they made here were pretty big. Now, let's just sort of go through them in order, and once again, jump out to sort of see some of these things demonstrated. You won't necessarily get a lot of detail from it, but at least you'll get to sort of see either what it's going to look like or an artist's interpretation of what it looks like. So the first one with Win365 Boot, effectively you're signing into your, so it's a bit of a weird name here, because I think someone might skim this and think, oh, you've got is it a thin client device? No, it's a Windows PC. You're signing in normal ways, hello, password, whatever. But it's actually then directly kicking off your session to Windows 365. So as opposed to you landing on your local desktop and then having to launch Win365, instead it's pushing you straight into Win365. So effectively trying to get people using that as the default location, as opposed to messing around locally before they kick it off. So that one I think is kind of fairly straightforward. And they demonstrate that one and talk about it a bit. Now, the Win365 switch, I was thinking, oh, well, Microsoft's infringing on another on a gaming console name here, but no, it's not a handheld version of Windows 365. So you can't play Animal Crossing on it, and as far as I'm aware, I don't think they support emulators in Win365. But it's just using the desktop switching capability in Win10, Win11 to switch back and forth between your local desktop and the cloud desktop. So any of you who have already using virtual desktops, now that was something that when it was first introduced, I tried to use it, but I don't remember the last time I actually used it properly, apart from showing how it worked. Like I'm sure there would be good mental reasons for it, so that you're not looking at work stuff when you're trying to stay away from work stuff. So Teams, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
But otherwise, just an easy way to switch back and forth. So all your normal gestures, etc., will work when you're switching. So so that one I think is fairly straightforward. Now the next one, let's speculate about this. So once again, we'll have to exclude Stephen and Kwok from this conversation, just in case they do know something or accidentally say something. So this one is kind of interesting, and the details are very, very light in terms of how it works. But the scenario that you'll hear about with this one is, imagine you're about to get on a plane and you don't know if there's going to be Wi-Fi connectivity. So you basically are at the airport and you say, I want to start working with Windows 365 offline. Now, if you sort of think about all of the different options that you'd have in terms of how could they potentially do it, probably the thing for me that I'd like to think that it is that there's some kind of container that is going to be running on top of your, because obviously you can containerize Windows. So I'd like to think that it's something lightweight and that it is containerization without it being full-blown virtual machine synchronization. And just sort of, because otherwise, if it's not doing it to a degree at a containerization level, the concern that I'd have there is what just the extra overhead required for a VM versus the container. So even with a container, I'd say that this is going to be like an 8 GB minimum kind of feature set, if not pushing the requirements up to 16 gig. But if it was a VM-based solution, then that could potentially blow it out even further. Well, actually 16 gig would probably still be okay. Yeah. But I guess it's probably more a matter of if the container probably could work on an 8 gig system, like not knowing exactly what they're doing with it. Let's just sort of speculate here. Whereas if it's a VM, running another VM and trying to be productive on an 8 gig machine, maybe we're all getting spoiled, but I'm thinking that probably isn't going to be the best experience, because we'd also have every other bit of virtualization protected capability enabled at the same time. So any other other ways here, because at first when I was thinking about it, there are a lot of other solutions in the past that you'd go, oh yeah, what about would it be something along the lines of your app virtualization, or not strictly app V, but app virtualization or something along those lines. But I'm pretty sure we'll get some more details soon on this one.
Yeah, I'm really curious to know the tech behind it. If it is just as basic as you've just got a copy of the container local and you're just storing delta changes until you get access to the internet, that's fine, but it is going to be pretty storage wise, it's going to be resource aggressive. But it could just be that simple, right? That we've just got a local container and we're just paging the delta changes until we get connectivity.
Yeah. And if we are talking about it like being containerized without it being a VM, then you've got to sort of then start thinking, well, hang on, like that means that you'd have to be locked tightly between the desktop, so whatever patch etc version that whatever is on your desktop PC would need to be a pretty damn close match to what your cloud PC has as well. Because if it's because if they're trying to keep it lightweight, unless it's unless it's a slightly fatter container and they're putting some additional frameworks etc in it. So just pure speculation on it. Like the idea is good, and it just sort of handles that that issue that that we've always had around when an organization has said everything's going to RDP or going back how many decades to ICA, etc. And it's like, but what if I want to do something when I'm not connected to to the internet or getting a VPN back in? That's where those things always broke. But if this is in some way addressing that, even though it's like it's going to be a V1 of whatever that tech is, I think this is still not this version, the initial version, but this for me feels like something that really could be a game changer moving forward.
Yeah, it's real. I'm genuinely curious how they're doing the offline stuff.
So it's because if you think about what's so the only reason why I'm kind of jumping to the container assumption here is that the devices, so then the other thing here as well is that I didn't see anything if they specifically said Win 10 or Win 11, but let's assume that it's Win 11. Then that means that you're going to have a bunch, so moving forward, more and more of those, whatever can be containerized in terms of, credential guard, app guard, etc. More and more of that stuff being enabled by default. That's, this being another layer on top of that with hardware that already supports that other stuff. It just kind of, to me, it makes sense. I could be, I'll be willing to admit that I'll, if I'm completely wrong on it. But for me, it just feels like, Windows containers. So finally we can say, you are using Windows containers. Not all containers are Linux, which is how it feels sometimes. And when you say, oh, have you got a containerized version of it? And they're like, oh, yeah, for Linux. Sorry, next one, the Win365 app, a bit simpler, just like an app to launch the Win365 pieces. Now, so some of the other things that I've seen, with some of these changes that are coming up is, people who are, basically people who, are not your typical user working for one organization and having one identity. So some of the things that I think haven't really been answered or addressed with some of these changes that are being made is, well, what if I've got to sort of switch between sessions with different credentials, etc. But I think that's an us problem, not really the typical end user kind of issue. So I think this is some of these things are things where SSO is going to not be our friend. But we've been dealing with that anyway. And now the final one, not that they announced Azure AD joint support, but they're saying that it's going to be generally available in May. Now, they didn't say when in May, not that I could see. They didn't say beginning of May or end of May. But if they're confident enough to say May, that makes me happy. Now, I think, was there anything else that was announced around Win365 that anyone can think of? Now, I'm sure there'd be plenty of sub points to this, and I think this is definitely something that we'll revisit. Like once we get that Win365 offline piece, I think that's probably when we should be doing our next Win365.
Yeah, I know. the idea of the Azure AD join support being a thing immediately made people get excited that they could then manage their Windows 365 cloud machines through Intune. But I've had a lot of conversations internally and just with other people in the community around what specifically do you intend to use Intune to manage this device with? You know, like the idea is these things are like tattooed with, you know, applications that are at a specific level with policies that are, you know, enforced already.
Yeah.
You know, the conversation, it becomes slightly difficult because, you know, we've been force-fed the very delicious Kool-Aid of Intune management means I don't have to worry about, you know, a reference image, except you kind of do in Windows 365. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation, one that I've yet to actually sort of come up with my own opinion on yet, but just something to think about.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, so hopefully we get more, some more details on some of this stuff, but I think that's probably the big one moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got a few more slides and then I'll have to stop the recording because
sure,
there's a slide that there's nothing bad on the slide, but I think it's the conversations that may occur around that slide that I don't think you probably, I don't want to record somebody saying something that comes back and haunts them in the future, especially if that person is me or Ben. Okay, so one of the things that was announced was organizational messages. So being able to send messages out to targeting client devices from Endpoint Manager. And the first thing that I thought of when I saw this was net send message, right? Rides again.
Yeah.
So I actually had to open up a command prompt and type in net send message to see if it was still there. But yeah, it doesn't look as if it's there anymore. Oh, I remember the joy of being on NetBIOS networks and good old net send message. And it was not a good thing because it did
NetSend was the thing that used to be able to crash Windows
if you
XP.
sent it, I think it was, when you started sending big enough packets across, it could cause problems. And it would just sort of do like a Windows notification on your desktop.
Uh-huh.
So this was really problematic on NetBIOS networks because there wasn't any filtering like that you'd normally get through routing and with subnets and all that kind of stuff. So it was problematic, to put it mildly. It was great in a work group environment. Mm-hmm. Depending on your definition of great, but not on even a reasonable at a reasonable level. So at this point, just looking at Kenneth's, so I don't think so I'm glad you called this up because so just sort of, and for anyone who's watching the recording, like Kenneth's just sort of typed in, will this have configurable buttons? So basically like your action cards that you can get through the Office apps. So no, all it's really going to have is the ability for you to either put in information or link out to things. So I think I think you were thinking about things the right way here, where and I'm assuming, that for others as well, that maybe you're thinking some of this stuff, which is, okay, we now have another messaging utility tool interface, etc., within the organizational for organizations that may already have multiple ones in place. Yeah. So for me, that would be like my main concern about it. But at least with this, I guess if we're targeting it, and it would also just be something like if you go through the scenarios where they're sort of talking about, and I think, Kenneth, basically because you've sort of got the, the learn more thing, if you sort of jump in and take a look at some of the examples that they're showing in the demos, like they're showing links out to click here for more training on this thing or whatever. But I guess the thing for me when I'm looking at this is, is this something that IT should be pushing out through this channel? Like, so if you're driving training or if you're trying to drive adoption, wouldn't you have like an adoption channel in Teams or something like that? So for me right now, like I'm somewhat struggling to get a good idea of use cases for this that are unique to this that we couldn't deliver another way.
Yeah.
And like, apart from, I guess, here in assignments, if we could sort of do device targeting, for example, but then if we could see the device in Endpoint Manager, we should be able to see who the user is, so we could target the user through Teams. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm sure I'll see a use case scenario where something's going to light up, and I'll go, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But otherwise, it's just like right now, like, I don't know if anyone sort of wants to give anyone's got some use cases in mind already for it where where this lights up. And look, and for me, it's just a matter of it's too new. And I'm also, and I guess the other thing is that I'm also still thinking of net send message. So I've got that in the back of my mind with this. So I think we'll give it the benefit of the doubt. And I'm sure, over the coming months, we'll probably see some use cases where it's like, oh, okay, that is a good targeted use. But I think that's the important thing here is that like any of the scenarios here, I think are going to be incredibly targeted versus, things like, Teams adoption, channels, and conversations, etc. I guess the other thing with this is if you don't want to interact with other people, you don't want to give them a chance to respond.
You just send out a notification.
Yeah.
So the other, and I mean, this is it, just from the screenshot, it's not giving me this information, but this would be amazing if you could set an endpoint message, an organizational message as a dependency on an application deployment. So potentially you need to advise someone that, hey, an application is installed. I need you to do the thing. So like this message will appear once a thing has happened. That could be cool.
So let me just see if oops. Oh yeah, so this is, I like that feature where I can paste the URL in once and it will take me to Microsoft.com. I paste it in again and it takes me to the correct page.
Yeah, it's a feature.
Yeah. Do you ever get that feature?
Quite a lot, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering if it was just targeting my usage patterns. So let me just see if they've got it. Okay, so that's where I pulled that thing from.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I took the screenshot of that was because they used the word trainings.
Right.
I find it annoying that they used the word trainings. But I think I think some of the the demo videos, they do go through it and sort of walk through it in a bit more detail. But again, it's that, because even here it's, so they are using the word targeted here. Actually, they're using the word, so so I guess, probably for a you must do this now kind of message, as opposed to in Teams, someone could have Teams closed, or they could be ignoring Teams.
Yeah.
Whereas, they could have blocked you in Teams.
For sure, yeah.
I
definitely think there's some good application that could be used here. But without seeing other screens, I've got a feeling like it's just sending a message and that's it.
But look, you can schedule it.
You can schedule it. That's obviously important. I feel like this is going to end up going back to the scary days of HR and demanding that I change the background every week. Steve knows what I'm talking about. To push the corporate mantra through IT.
Changing the MS Gina sign-in DLL
Yeah,
every 3 days.
Yes, that's the one I'm talking about. It's cool. I feel like if anyone from HR or the crayon, the paper and was it paper and crayons department, get a hold of this.
Department.
Yeah, it's gonna get a little hectic.
Okay.
So just pretend that doesn't exist until we figure out a good application for it, because otherwise you're going to get notifications every 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing as well here that I'm sort of curious about is what roles or what role will need to be assigned
so that you can go in and just do that.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah, because
global admin.
Device
just
messenger.
a joke, everybody.
Yep.
Is it though?
You won't need global admin. I don't know. It's an easy joke.
GA, and EA.
Yeah.
For on-prem. Okay, so just a couple of other things before we. Okay, no, we've got 2 more slides, I think, and then it's we'll stop the recording. So we've got a topic that, yeah, probably better to not be recording that one, but it probably was one of the most talked about announcements, but we won't record that one. Anyone who's watching this recording in the future, please leave a comment below in YouTube comments, letting us know what you think the topic is. The first to guess correctly
wins
a prize of a one of the
used
boxes
Microsoft jacket
used with cat fur on it. Yes. Okay, so 2 more, just 2 quick ones here. There was quite a bit of focus put into some of the content around the upcoming application management for Edge, and probably when I was sort of looking at it, I was trying to figure out, what was drastically different around it. And then one of the things that jumped out at me when you start paying attention to it is that you've got basically, from what it looks like, and there's not a lot of, I couldn't see a lot of clarity around it. But if you watch some of the demonstrations around it, after they've added Edge in, one of the things you can do, so basically we're just using, it's an app, just using an app protection policy. But one of the comments in there was that it's using, I think the comment was something along the lines of, like, it's using Windows Defender for device level security. But I think what they meant to say there was that it's using Defender for endpoint. So basically, and this is where it gets a bit confusing, and it's not explained at all in any of the content I've seen so far. But it almost looks like what they're doing here is saying that even though you're not necessarily enrolling the device, or you're enrolling, you're not enrolling the device with Intune, but you are, from what it seems like to me anyway at this point, it feels more like it's going to be, that you'd still have to have it enrolled with Defender for endpoint in order for Defender for endpoint to, basically it looks like it's at an app protection policy layer. It looks like it's using that same, is your device compliant, or what level of risk is it that you'd be using in a compliant, that then would roll into like a CA policy, for example.
Sure.
So there's basically some extra stuff in there that adds that in, that it just wasn't explained well. And I just realized that the one place I didn't look to see if there was any specific information on it was I didn't check the Edge blog to see if they actually blogged about it, because that would have actually made sense. So that's something that, based on what was said and what was on screen, like I'm just not confident with that final piece. In terms of to me, there was something that wasn't quite right with some of the wording. Now, it may have been accurate. They may have actually, like, Windows Defender may have been what they actually meant, but I guess, maybe it's just using, local security settings to make that determination. Okay, another thing that we'll have to sort of wait and see. Now, the next one, I don't want to spend too much time on this one, because I think this is one that will definitely be worth going into in a lot more detail in the future, is what they're calling it like the endpoint management experience. But you're basically giving allowing users to elevate privileges or certain users to elevate certain privileges. So basically saying that, okay, for certain tasks, you can actually elevate your privilege in this case. So, so I guess for this kind of thing, it's, again, one of those things where I think, you're going to have to, pick and choose who, what, where, why, how, etc. This, it's not something that you're just going to turn on. Now, other things with it is that it can be, self-elevation, and with the self-elevation option, basically a combination of any or all of justification, username and password, or MFA can be used. Alternatively, it can be something where you can request it, support can approve it, and then you get that permission for X amount of time. So, so Kenneth, I'm not going to read out your comment because you've already figured out what the final slide is. That's not going to be part of the recording.
But good work.
Yeah, excellent detective work. So so this so with the with that, I think this to me starts really helping out where because you still see pushback from especially with people working remotely, etc., with people like they know why, or hopefully they know why they shouldn't be local admin, but they still want to be local admin. So this is just something where we can say, look, you're not going to get local admin. We're not changing our mind on it, but there will be particular tasks that you can that you will be able to perform. So this one I think is pretty good. Like any of you who've worked with privileged identity management over on the Azure AD side, it's a lot of I think probably a lot of the same logic is going to be used here. Or in terms of the way we would logic in terms of how we'd be thinking about it, not in terms of how we'd actually be going through and managing it. But otherwise, this one demos really well. So looking forward to seeing that. This was one of the demos where it was like, is this in any of my tenants? And I sort of cycled through them all and I was like, damn it, it's not in there yet. Now, for this one, this is a slide that I put in for Eddie, not knowing that he'd mentioned the topic or that it was a topic that he was even remotely interested in. But because Eddie wants the ability to still step back in time and approve certain updates manually, it's the driver updates. So there weren't any. So from what I can gather, there were no official announcements around availability for this this time round with these announcements. Now it did make it into like one of the mechanics videos. So I was so that had me thinking, oh, is there like an announcement somewhere? But it just is one of the things that was in there. So I don't think there was anything that really changed from the Ignite announcements. But really just here, a couple of the big things is that it's not just drivers, it's also firmware in there as well. And that you can go through and just say, look, do it automatically after X number of days. But as soon as you switch from automatic updates over to manual updates, then for the targeted devices, that's where it turns into into that manual approval per driver update. Now, some of the things that I think are really good, even just with the simple UI, and it might be kind of tough to read down here, but just listing the number of devices that it's going to be applied to is something that's going to make that decision-making process. It's like it's a Friday after, or it's getting close to Friday. If it's, let's say that's 40 devices, max out of 40,000 devices.
Yes, just approve it. 4 o'clock
on a Friday.
Well, we'll give it a Thursday on a long weekend.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
Thursday on a long weekend while you're sitting in an airport about to jump on a plane, and your name is Steve.
So that's the time. So that's pretty much the guaranteed time where I'll be off, especially if it's an international flight. Yeah. That's the time that I will get an insider build notification. And you better believe it, it's coming down.
Yep. While you're on the airplane, watching your data
or-
limit for the airline.
Oh
just
no,
go,
no, I'll make sure it's down before that. But that way, like the way that I look at it is, like, I wasn't going to use my laptop on the plane anyway. Like I was just going to sleep and watch movies. So I'd be kidding myself if I said I was going to do any work on a 16-hour flight. It's like a perfect time not to do work. So yeah, so this so I like this, and I think like the takeaway that I've got from this is that I can see people who initially go down that manual update path because it's what they've been dreaming of. I can see that this is going to make it a lot easier for them to start maybe getting used to the idea of some of this stuff being, being pushed out. Now, I guess the concern that I've got with some of this stuff still, though, is with things like firmware updates. They are things that I think a lot of people are still going to be a little bit nervous about pushing firmware updates out automatically without a lot more testing and planning. And either unmute if you want to chat about it, or if what your feedback is. But what's your stance? Like so first of all, let's just keep Surface devices out of this conversation. And the reason why I say that is just that, generally speaking, I think people who've basically gone down the Surface path that I've dealt with are happier just to let drivers, firmware, etc., get pushed out, updated automatically. It's not something they really want to be too concerned with. However, those, anyone who's using, devices from other OEMs, they're always the ones who have got their horror stories about firmware updates and try to minimize the number of firmware updates that they need to do. So just seeing, okay, so Kenneth, so that's actually a positive story. So for you, Kenneth, so are those coming down through, are you just letting Windows Update for Business push them down if they're available, or are you managing that through something else? Okay, yep. Okay, so so it is through Woofbee. So so the thing that I'd have to hope is that with something like a firmware update coming down through Woofbee is that there is, that OEMs are really doing a lot more testing of the specific builds or updates that they're pushing out through this.
Nice dreamland that you're living in.
I know it is. I like, it's, I say things like that despite having worked in the OEM team for 5 years or so.
Yeah. I just think like the minimal viable product that we currently have is really good. This is going to be better because this allows us to pick and choose. So, this is just a maturation of what we've currently got. And I, for one, cannot wait until it goes public. Because we've got so many people that I deal with on a daily basis that need this. And when I tell them about it and they're like, well, can I use it? I'm like, not yet. No ETA, but trust me, it's going to be great when it gets here.
Yeah, so good to see. So Kenneth, so just anyone watching the recording, like Kenneth was mentioning that, pushing firmware updates out via Woofbee to 24,000 HP clients. Has worked amazingly so far, and that's his wording there. So so with this one, it's like, I think where this is going to be really, well, not problematic, but I think where this I think is going to start pushing people in the right direction are organizations that don't really have any degree of standardization.
That's
because
definitely
doing that manually. There's somebody in particular I'm thinking of who I know is waiting, and a few of you also know, New South Wales-based person, and I used New South Wales specifically as the clue. Who, this is something that is like basically like a requirement for them. And that is also an organization that would have a ridiculous lack of consistency across all of the hundreds of locations they have, hundreds or thousands of locations they have across the state. So trying to manage things that way would be pretty fairly problematic this way. But it's better. It's giving if that's what people want, that's what's available.
Yeah. I just hope it doesn't get us into a point where people start micromanaging what goes in and out of their environment. Like, this should be used sparingly to make sure that the majority of your devices get patched for drivers and that sort of stuff, but not like we're not going back to the days where the intern is sitting there installing KBs.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Why not?
A couple of reasons.
Way to learn IT.
It's a great way to learn IT. In 2022, we should all be deploying x86 applications manually on USB keys.
That's very progressive. I'm still deploying my 16-bit applications.
Oh, that's very funny.
My 16-bit installers with 32-bit application.
Yes.
So one of the other things that was mentioned I think it was mentioned in the mechanics video, which was a bit of I don't know how I feel about this, but they were talking about, and this is something definitely open to people's feedback, and I can understand why it might be used in some cases, but also sort of mentioning the option of just deploying, like if the driver is available, only available as an exe, just sort of pushing that out through, basically pushing it out like an application in Endpoint Manager. And I don't know if I need to sleep on that one. I need to think about it a bit more, because
if a driver is going to get included in a system like this, it should at minimum meet the requirements to be in a system like this.
Yeah.
If a vendor can't figure that out, then they shouldn't be allowed to be part of the system. And this is me, like I am aggressively for standardization of this sort of stuff.
Yeah. Now the types of scenarios I can think of would be like, so let's just use NVIDIA. So someone says, oh no, we need the additional libraries, etc., that are included, not just the video driver.
Yeah.
So that would be, they'd be the kinds of examples that you could, that I could think of. Like there's, obviously there'd be a lot more than that, but just and once again, this is sort of just, going back to the days of going, oh, there's an exe, let's crack it open and pull out the folder that the OEM inf file is in, and let's just install the driver. So basically, doing like the big monolithic installs in, and as you said, especially in this environment, it just didn't feel right. Okay, so what we'll do here is, because we've got some stuff coming up that we sort of want everyone to be as brutal or frank as possible, I'll stop recording now. So let me
I believe the term you're looking for there, Mark, is candid.
Candid, yes. Frank and honest feedback. So let me just hit the stop recording here.